The tremor in my mother's usually imperious tone was the first discordant note in the symphony of my meticulously ordered life. Victoria Sterling Ashworth doesn't do tremors. She orchestrates. She persuades with silken threats. She wields guilt like a finely honed scalpel. But she never, ever sounds frayed. I'm Alexandra, and for 34 years, I've been the bedrock in a family that views fiscal responsibility as an unfortunate, rather déclassé, ailment. The timestamp on the voicemail was 2:58 a.m. My mother's words, usually so clipped and precise, were a breathless torrent. Alex, darling, there's a situation. With the bank. We must speak. It concerns Sebastian's venture capital. Call us back this instant. Please. I replayed it twice more, each repetition etching the awful certainty deeper. They'd finally managed it. The precise catastrophe I'd spent a year wargaming, the betrayal I'd sensed gathering like a Category 5 hurricane. My phone chimed again. My father, Alistair. Alexandra, you need to come to the townhouse. Immediately. It's 3 in the morning, I said, though I was already shrugging into a cashmere wrap over my silk pajamas. Can this not wait until a civilized hour? Your mother is. Just come. 15 minutes later, my driver pulled up to the imposing limestone facade on the Upper East Side. The house I'd endured my childhood in looked as immutable as ever, manicured boxwoods, gleaming brass, an air of inherited wealth and unshakable prestige. Inside, my parents were huddled at the massive marble island in the Boffey kitchen, looking as if they'd shed 20 years of carefully maintained youth overnight. What have you done? I asked, my voice flat. I knew. Oh, I knew. Victoria reached for my hand. I kept mine clasped, tucked into the pockets of my wrap. Darling, she began, her voice laced with that familiar, cloying sweetness. We were compelled to make some rather difficult choices, for Sebastian, for the family legacy. What did you do? Alistair cleared his throat, a sound like dry leaves skittering across pavement. The bridge loan, for Sebastian and Pierre's new fund, they required additional security. We leveraged your private equity portfolio. My private equity portfolio? The one meticulously built since my first Wall Street bonus? The one containing nearly 2 decades of my shrewdest investments? Just as a guarantee, of course, Victoria interjected smoothly. We never imagined it would come to this, but Piers has vanished. And the capital calls. The kitchen seemed to undulate. We were certain you'd see the necessity, Victoria pressed, her eyes pleading. Sebastian was on the cusp of something monumental. You've always been so resourceful in supporting the family. A laugh escaped me. It was not a pleasant sound. How? I demanded. How did you gain access to my holdings at Rothschild and Company? Alistair avoided my gaze, suddenly fascinated by the Sub-Zero refrigerator. We still possess some of your old signatory authorizations from your university days. The bank has known our family for generations. You falsified my consent. It was a statement, not a question. Victoria flinched a tiny, almost imperceptible movement. Not falsified, precisely. We merely expedited your presumed agreement. Rothschild understands the Ashworths. Where is Sebastian now? He's not returning my calls, Alistair admitted, his voice thin. But Alexandra, that's immaterial at present. The bank is calling in the loan. They're demanding the collateral. I pulled out my phone, tapping open my private banking app. Victoria made a move towards it, but I took a half step back. Don't, I said, my voice a sliver of ice. Don't touch me. I angled the screen towards them. The portfolio overview showed a current valuation of $18,754.32. Victoria's face turned the color of bleached bone. What? No. No. There should be upwards of $2.5 million there. Alexandra, what did you do? What did I do? My voice was arctic. That's genuinely your inquiry at this juncture? Alexandra, Alistair began, we need that capital. The townhouse, our shares in the family foundation. They're all cross-collateralized. We could lose everything. I surveyed the kitchen where I'd learned to balance spreadsheets while Sebastian learned that his financial indiscretions would invariably be absorbed by the family fortune. Where I'd observed my parents enable him, time and again, using my financial acumen as their perpetual backstop. Do you know what's truly amusing? I said, though nothing about this was remotely funny. 6 months ago, Victoria started making these odd, oblique inquiries about my offshore asset management. Then Sebastian began his nocturnal calls, waxing lyrical about his paradigm-shifting fintech venture, and Alistair kept intoning how family is the ultimate investment. I walked towards the grand foyer, my hand on the antique brass doorknob. So, I restructured. All of it. Moved the assets to a blind trust domiciled in Liechtenstein. Technically, a charitable foundation now holds those assets. Entirely legitimate, I assure you. My legal team at Sullivan and Cromwell is beyond reproach. You anticipated this? Victoria's voice was a faint whisper. I anticipated you'd attempt something of this nature eventually. I simply didn't foresee you'd stoop to outright securities fraud to achieve it. But the townhouse, Alistair protested, your ancestral home, is poised to become someone else's concern. I opened the door. You should probably contact your attorneys. I already have one, Alexandra, Victoria called after me, a hint of her old steel returning. We're your family. I paused, turning back one last time. Yes, you are. And that is precisely why I knew to shield myself from you. The heavy oak door closed behind me with a soft, definitive thud that resonated like the final gavel strike in a long, exhausting trial. You did what? Charlotte Devereux nearly sloshed her artisanal espresso across the polished mahogany of her corner office desk. 3 weeks before my parents' pre-dawn implosion, I'd initiated my financial exodus. I liquidated everything, I reiterated, watching my best friend and lead counsel at Devereux and Finch absorb the information. Every share, every bond, the inheritance from Grandma Man, even my emergency liquidity fund. And you're convinced they were orchestrating something? I produced my phone and played the recording from 4 weeks prior. Victoria's cultured voice filled the office. Alexandra, darling, I was having a chat with old Henderson at Rothschild's. He mentioned your emerging markets portfolio. Have you ever considered diversifying some of those assets into the Ashworth family office? Charlotte's expression became flinty as she listened. That's a blatant reconnaissance mission. There's more, isn't there? I nodded. The recording continued, Sebastian's enthusiastic baritone now. Mother, I just need you to broach it with her. Alex is a wizard with this stuff. She'd want to be instrumental if she grasped the sheer scale of this opportunity. I stopped the recording. And so it went. Alistair inquiring about my tax identification numbers for estate planning purposes. Sebastian's inebriated calls about his revolutionary blockchain platform with peers. It was like observing a multi-vehicle pileup in agonizing slow motion. Astute woman, Charlotte said, her fingers already flying across her keyboard. Restructuring was the prudent move, but we must ensure it's hermetically sealed. Her gaze flickered between screens. What quantum are we discussing? $2,688,471.50. She let out a low whistle. A rather substantial sum to immunize. Grant me a couple of hours. Those hours stretched into a full afternoon, but by sunset, we had constructed an unassailable fortress, a Liechtenstein-based foundation, the Nightingale Philanthropic Trust, with meticulously documented transfers of all assets. There, Charlotte declared, printing the final notarized documents. Your wealth is now legally held by the Nightingale Trust. You are the sole director of its advisory board, but the foundation is the owner. Should anyone attempt to claim your personal assets as collateral, they will encounter a meticulously emptied vault. Precisely. But Alexandra, she leaned forward, if they've already acted on your prior information. My phone buzzed. Sebastian. Alex, old girl. His voice was excessively buoyant. Remember that paradigm shift I outlined? Well, Piers and I are making serious headway. Groundbreaking stuff. Just require a little familial support to cross the finish line. How much? I inquired, my tone devoid of inflection. What? How much do you need? It's not a direct investment, darling, he protested. We merely need some backing. Mother and father are assisting with the requisite paperwork. I ended the call. It's accelerating more rapidly than I anticipated, I told Charlotte. She nodded, her expression grim. We should subpoena the loan agreements immediately if they've utilized your credentials without explicit, current consent. They have. I feel it in my bones. That's actionable fraud, Alexandra. Egregious fraud. My phone buzzed again. A text from Victoria. Sebastian is distressed. Return his call. Family supports family. I showed Charlotte the message. She shook her head. They truly cannot perceive it, can they? The extent of their exploitation. Oh, they perceive it, I said quietly. They simply don't care, as long as it achieves their ends. That night, sleep eluded me. I replayed Sebastian's financial history, the disastrous hedge fund he'd launched in his 20s that had decimated Alistair's bonus pool, the disruptive art market algorithm that had consumed Victoria's inheritance from a distant relative, the succession of speculative ventures that always culminated identically, with family capital evaporating and Sebastian vowing to learn from the experience. My phone illuminated with another text, this time from Alistair. Your mother is beside herself with worry. Just speak with Sebastian. He needs his sister. I typed back 3 words, and my needs. His reply was swift. Don't be obtuse, Alexandra. Family above all. I was at Charlotte's office before the partners' meeting the next morning. There's something further I require, I said, placing a stack of financial dossiers on her desk. Every statement, every application, every document bearing my name for the past 15 years. She began to sift through them. A pattern of conduct. Victoria's remark about the family office resonated. I need to understand the historical scope of their involvement in my affairs. Charlotte's face grew serious. You believe this is not the first instance? I believe. I paused, the enormity of it settling like lead in my chest. I believe I've been their undeclared underwriter for a significant portion of my adult life. She nodded, already reaching for her intercom. I'll assign my forensic team. But Alexandra, she caught my eye. If we unearth what you suspect, then I'll know I did the only rational thing. And they will learn that all actions have commensurate consequences. As I exited her building, my phone buzzed with another message from Victoria. Family council this evening. Attendance is mandatory. Your brother needs us. I typed back 2 words, no longer. Then I blocked their numbers, drove to Rothschild and Company, and formally closed every account linked to my personal name. The private banker looked grave as I instructed the transfer of the residual $12,301.15 to a new, unlinked account. Is everything in order, Ms. Sterling Ashworth? I smiled, a genuine, if weary, smile. Yes, Julian. Everything is precisely as it must be. The loan documents lay spread across my parents' antique Regency dining table like a morbid autopsy. 3 days after their pre-dawn confession, I'd compelled this meeting through Charlotte. Show me everything, I commanded. Victoria's hands trembled as she arranged the papers. Alistair stood by the tall windows, his back to us, feigning intense interest in the manicured courtyard garden. It's all perfectly standard, Victoria said, her voice artificially bright. Just some routine instruments for Sebastian's new fund. I pointed to my purported signature on page 7. That is not my authentic signature. Well, no, but... And this brokerage statement. I produced another document. The one itemizing my portfolio as collateral. It's dated 2 months ago. Curious, as I divested and transferred those assets 3 months prior. Alistair finally turned. We had to act. Sebastian and Piers had an unparalleled opportunity. Whereas Piers, incidentally, I interrupted. Given your unwavering confidence in this unparalleled opportunity. A heavy silence permeated the room. Victoria suddenly became engrossed in aligning the edges of the documents. We cannot seem to reach him, Alistair conceded at last. Cannot reach him? I leaned forward. Elucidate. He's gone, Victoria whispered. His mobile is disconnected. His flat is empty. Sebastian believes he might be in Dubai. But I laughed, a hollow, mirthless sound. So the managing partner has absconded with the initial capital, and your recourse was to forge my financial authorizations. We didn't forge. Victoria began. Cease your prevarications. I slammed my hand on the table, the crystal water glasses rattling. I have the original signature cards right here. You photocopied my signature from my old university enrollment forms. You fabricated account statements. You committed blatant securities fraud for your son. Victoria's voice rose. Everything we have ever done has been to preserve this family's standing. No, I said quietly. Everything you have done has been to insulate Sebastian from reality. And now you've embroiled me in your fraudulent activities, without my consent. Alistair cleared his throat. Alexandra, you failed to comprehend. The townhouse, it's also pledged against this loan. We used it as tertiary collateral, assuming Sebastian's fund would miraculously succeed where every prior venture has floundered. How many iterations of this farce must we endure? I pulled out my phone and began to enumerate. The artisanal gin distillery in Brooklyn that cost you $500,000. The AI-driven concierge service that consumed Victoria's share of the Newport cottage. The sustainable fashion label that declared insolvency with theatrical flair. And now this. Those were educational experiences. Victoria protested. They were catastrophic failures that you sanitized. That we all sanitized. But not this time. A car door slammed outside. Through the window, I saw Sebastian stumbling up the steps, clearly inebriated despite the early evening hour. Impeccable timing, I muttered as he burst through the dining room doors. Did you inform her? He demanded, swaying precariously. About the default notice? My head snapped up. The what? Victoria shot Sebastian a look of pure venom, but he was too far gone to register it. 7 days, he slurred. The consortium gives us 7 days before they seize the assets. Unless. He looked at me, a flicker of hope in his bloodshot eyes. Unless you bail us out. I finished again. You have the resources, he blustered. You've always had the resources. Little Miss Midas with her portfolio and her. Enough. Alistair's voice cracked like a whip. Sebastian, sit down before you collapse. I stood, gathering the damning documents. The townhouse faces foreclosure in 7 days. Victoria reached for my hand. Alexandra, darling, we can rectify this as a family. You simply need to transfer some capital back. Those funds are no longer accessible, I cut her off. They are held by a philanthropic foundation, one meticulously structured to prevent precisely this type of malfeasance. But we're your family. Sebastian lurched to his feet. You can't just. Can't what? Protect my own financial integrity? Watch what I've diligently built be siphoned into another of your ill-conceived schemes. I headed for the door. The money is gone. The townhouse is, effectively, gone. And this time, your safety net will not be deployed. Alexandra, Alistair called after me. The press will be merciless. The foreclosure, the funds collapse, it will decimate our reputation. I turned back one last time. You achieved that yourselves when you decided my consent was optional. When you elected to commit fraud rather than confront uncomfortable truths. What do you intend to do? Victoria's voice was small, stripped of its usual authority. I intend to allow you to experience the full spectrum of consequences. Perhaps for the first time in your lives. I opened the door. Oh, and Sebastian? You might want to engage competent legal counsel. When the consortium cannot recover the funds from me, they will undoubtedly pursue you with considerable vigor. The last thing I heard as I walked away was Sebastian's drunken wail. But you assured me Alexandra would resolve everything. You promised. Some promises, I reflected, were destined to be broken. Particularly those underwritten with someone else's fortune. Just consider what this will do to the family name. Victoria's voice, sharp and brittle, crackled through my phone's speaker. Day 4 of their increasingly frantic campaign to compel me to repatriate the funds. The family name? I repeated. You mean the one you so liberally appended to fraudulent legal documents? Alexandra, please. Alistair's partners at the firm are already making inquiries. The committee at the Met is abuzz with speculation. We raised you better than this. This, self-interest. I ended the call and immediately received a text from Alistair. The financial press will annihilate us. Is that truly your objective? Before I could formulate a response, my Aunt Diana's name flashed on my screen. I answered, bracing for another volley of guilt. Those imbeciles finally overplayed their hand, didn't they? Diana's acerbic voice held not a shred of sympathy. Victoria called me, weeping about how her ungrateful viper of a daughter is allowing the family to crash and burn. And you're calling to persuade me to intervene? Good heavens, no. Diana laughed, a dry, cynical sound. I'm calling to enlighten you about that townhouse they're so desperate to salvage. Something they'd rather you didn't know. I sat up straighter. I'm listening. Your grandparents, my parents, established a trust for the property. A three-way beneficial interest. Victoria, myself, and you. Direct inheritance to the grandchild. My hand tightened on the phone. What? Oh, they neglected to mention that? Utterly shocking. Diana's sarcasm could etch glass. You've held a 1/3 beneficial ownership of that townhouse since you turned 21, Alexandra. Yet, somehow, they've been making unilateral decisions regarding it without your consultation. How is that conceivable? Because they never encouraged you to scrutinize the deed. But that's not the extent of it. She paused. Remember that education trust your grandparents established? The one that was mysteriously reallocated when Sebastian required seed capital for his first disastrous startup. My stomach plummeted. No. Indeed. That was also designated for you. Victoria and Alistair liquidated it, in Sebastian's name. Utilized some archaic custodial paperwork from when you were a minor. Does the modus operandi sound familiar? I grabbed my laptop, fingers trembling as I typed. Diana, I need you to send me everything you possess. Documents, dates, any correspondence. Already dispatched. Check your secure server. She hesitated. Alexandra, this isn't the first time they've plundered your assets. It's merely the first time you've caught them red-handed. After disconnecting, I forwarded everything to Charlotte and drove straight to her offices. She was already immersed in the files when I arrived. She shook her head. This is systematic financial abuse, Alexandra. They've been co-opting your identity and assets for years. How extensive? She turned her monitor towards me. The education trust was valued at $250,000 when they misappropriated it. Your equity in the townhouse is approximately $1.5 million at current market rates. And there's more. Smaller investment accounts, dividend reinvestment plans, all systematically depleted or leveraged for Sebastian's ventures. Why didn't I discern it? Because they conditioned you to perceive it as normal. To believe supporting the family meant acquiescing to their unceasing demands. My phone buzzed. A text from my cousin Ethan, FYI. Sebastian is holding court at the Carlisle bar, regaling anyone who'll listen about your illicit offshore shell company. Claims he has irrefutable proof you're illegally sheltering assets. How would Sebastian know about the Nightingale Trust? Charlotte frowned. Someone must have divulged it. I showed her another text from Alistair. If regulatory bodies investigate your offshore arrangements, it won't solely be our reputation imperiled. Charlotte's eyes narrowed. Are they threatening you? Attempting to intimidate me into compliance. Their standard playbook. Well, she smiled, a grim, predatory expression, Let's provide them with something genuinely terrifying. She pulled out a fresh legal pad. Time to file for an ex parte injunction. We're going to freeze everything. The townhouse sale, any pending asset transfers, all of it. Until we can definitively prove their historical misappropriation of your assets. They'll contest it. Let them. The paper trail is irrefutable. And Alexandra, she caught my eye. The statute of limitations on financial fraud of this nature is typically 6 years. Everything they've perpetrated since you were 28, that's potentially prosecutable. My phone lit up with another call from Victoria. This time, I answered on speaker. Alexandra, we are your parents. We have provided you with every advantage. You owe us this. Actually, I said calmly, according to grandfather and grandmama's wills, you owe me a considerable sum. Shall we discuss the education trust you purloined? Or the townhouse equity you conveniently failed to disclose? Or perhaps we should begin with the numerous instances of signature forgery since I attained my majority. Who? Victoria's voice quavered. Who told you? Does it matter? It's all meticulously documented. And now it's all evidence. Evidence? Alistair's voice, tight with alarm, joined the call. Evidence of what? Fraud, Charlotte interjected clearly. My client is pursuing all available legal remedies. I strongly advise you both to retain separate and highly competent counsel without delay. The line went dead. Well, I said into the ensuing silence, I suppose family dinner is indefinitely postponed. Charlotte began organizing the files. They're going to retaliate fiercely now. Are you prepared for that? I thought about years of insidious manipulation, of stolen opportunities, of being the sensible one while they systematically pillaged my future. Yes, I said, I'm prepared to demonstrate precisely how sensible I can be. The reams of documents on David Sinclair's expansive desk painted a narrative that churned my stomach. Sinclair, a forensic accountant with a law degree, had spent 3 days meticulously reconstructing my financial trajectory. It's methodical, he stated, gesturing towards a complex timeline. Every significant financial milestone in your adult life has been diverted. University graduation gift from your godfather, ostensibly invested, ultimately rerouted to Sebastian's first boutique consultancy. Seed money for your planned angel investments, mysteriously absorbed into a family contingency fund. Even your first mortgage had undisclosed liens against it, benefiting family holding companies. How did I remain oblivious? Because they constructed this edifice of deceit incrementally, like a house of cards. One subtle deception at a time, normalized by the expectation of familial duty. He produced another document. But this is what I find most egregious. I looked at the paper. It was a loan application from 5 years prior for a substantial sum, with what purported to be my signature at the bottom. I never authorized this. No, Sinclair concurred. But someone did, repeatedly. We've identified 23 distinct documents with skillful variations of your signature, all utilized to secure financing or transfer assets. My phone buzzed. A text from Ethan, Sebastian's at the King Cole bar again. Loudly proclaiming you're attempting to destroy the family out of spite. Aunt Victoria is reportedly having a hysterical episode in the ladies' lounge. Let them weep, I muttered. Sinclair raised an eyebrow. The social ostracism will intensify. Are you prepared for that onslaught? Before I could respond, my apartment intercom buzzed. Through the speaker, I heard Sebastian's slurred, belligerent voice. Alex, open this door. We need to have a discussion. I pressed the talk button. Go home, Sebastian. You're destroying Mother. Father's firm is suggesting he take an extended sabbatical. All because you refuse to support your own family. Sinclair was already discreetly recording on his phone. You falsified my financial authorizations, I stated clearly into the intercom. You and Mother and Father committed egregious fraud. It wasn't fraud, Sebastian shouted. It was just sophisticated financial engineering. And your secretive offshore trust isn't any more legitimate. I froze. Sinclair looked up sharply. What secret of trust? Sebastian. The one you established to conceal your assets. Father discovered all about it from his contact at your bank. He knows precisely where you've moved every last penny. Sinclair was already making rapid notes. That constitutes a flagrant breach of banking confidentiality. We can add that to the civil suit and report it to the regulatory authorities. The buzzer continued its insistent clamor. Sebastian's voice grew more desperate. Just come down and talk. We can resolve this. Like we always resolve everything. There's nothing to resolve, I said. It's concluded. Then I'll tell everyone, his voice cracked with impotent fury. About the Liechtenstein Foundation. About how you've been meticulously planning this for months. How you've betrayed your own blood. Proceed, I replied. Inform them how you knew I was on the verge of severing the financial lifeline, so you preemptively committed fraud. Divulge everything. Silence, then a muffled thud. Likely his fist against the reinforced steel door. You think you're so damn perfect, he spat. So much better than us. But you're just a cold, selfish bitch. Always have been. Mother and father gave you everything. No, I said quietly. They took everything. And now, they are losing everything. That is the immutable arithmetic of consequences. I heard him stumble away, spewing obscenities. Sinclair concluded his recording. Well, he said, that was rather illuminating. He effectively admitted to knowledge of premeditated fraud and implicated your father in a serious breach of client confidentiality with a financial institution. My phone lit up with a message from Charlotte. Your parents' legal counsel has made an overture. They wish to negotiate a settlement. Another text followed from Victoria. We raised you better than this. A daughter who truly loved her family would never pursue this vindictive course. I showed the messages to Sinclair. He nodded grimly. They're growing desperate. The foreclosure clock is ticking relentlessly, and they're realizing their customary tactics are proving ineffectual. What's our next strategic move? He produced a fresh legal document. We file this. It's a comprehensive civil complaint, detailing every instance of financial malfeasance we've uncovered. Every forged signature, every misappropriated fund, every fraudulent transfer. Once filed, it becomes a matter of public record. They'll be publicly humiliated. They'll be formally investigated, he corrected. By the bank's internal affairs, possibly by the SEC for securities fraud, and the IRS for tax implications. This isn't about humiliation, Alexandra. This is about potential criminal conduct. My hands trembled as I signed the complaint. My authentic signature, not the facsimiles they'd so skillfully deployed over the years. One final item, Sinclair said, pulling out a last, damning document. We unearthed this from the archived records. It dates back 12 years. I looked at the paper and felt my blood turn to ice. It was a transfer authorization, moving my entire university graduation fund into a newly opened business account. The signature was a clear, if amateurish, forgery. That's how it commenced, I whispered. My first major independent investment was delayed because of this, and you were forced to secure a less favorable loan. Sinclair finished. While Sebastian utilized your capital for his first spectacularly failed luxury lifestyle magazine. My phone buzzed one more time. A message from Alistair. Whatever you are contemplating filing, desist. Please. We can resolve this amicably, as a family. I looked at Sinclair. File it. File everything. He nodded and began collating the documents for electronic submission. You understand there's no retracing our steps from this point. Excellent, I said. Because I'm finished with retracing. It's time they moved forward, directly into the consequences they have so diligently earned. The bank's formal notice of asset seizure arrived on a Tuesday. By Wednesday afternoon, my phone was incandescent with messages detailing my mother's exceedingly public disintegration at a charity luncheon at the plaza. She simply began screaming in the middle of the salmon course, Diana recounted over the phone, her voice laced with grim satisfaction. overturning a floral centerpiece, accusing you of every imaginable perfidy. They had to discreetly escort her out through a service exit. And father, his firm has strongly encouraged him to take an immediate and indefinite leave of absence. Apparently, prominent allegations of fraud cast a rather unfavorable light on a wealth management practice. I was at Charlotte's office when Diana called again, barely an hour later. "You need to be aware of something," she said, her voice taut with urgency. Sebastian secured another loan. A private one from some exceedingly unsavory individuals with Eastern European connections. Used Alistair's remaining personal investment portfolio as collateral. How do you know this? Because one of their associates just paid a visit to my building, inquiring as to his whereabouts. Alexandra, these are not bank representatives. These are the sort who specialize in orthopedic rearrangements. Charlotte was already accessing secure databases on her computer. We need to document everything meticulously, especially if there are criminal elements involved. My phone buzzed. A group text from Victoria. Emergency family conclave. 7 p.m. at the townhouse. Everyone's attendance is critical. Don't go, Charlotte warned. I must, I said. But I won't be going alone. At 7 p.m. precisely, I walked into my parents' townhouse with Charlotte at my side. The grand salon was filled. Victoria, Alistair, Sebastian, Diana, and Ethan. Victoria's makeup was a disastrous ruin, Alistair looked ashen, and Sebastian couldn't stop his hands from trembling. "This is a private family matter," Victoria snapped, her glare fixed on Charlotte. "She remains," I said, taking a seat on a Louis XVI armchair. "Now, what is the nature of this emergency?" "We need to resolve this," Alistair said, his voice strained. "As a family. The bank, the other, investors, they're not being rational." "Rational?" Diana scoffed. "You committed systematic fraud, Alistair. Repeatedly. Against your own daughter. We did what was necessary." Victoria burst out, her voice cracking. "For Sebastian. For the Ashworth legacy. And how is that endeavor progressing?" I asked quietly. Sebastian leaped to his feet. "This is entirely your fault. If you had simply cooperated, as you were supposed to." "As I was supposed to?" I pulled out my phone and activated the voice recorder. "Enlighten me, Sebastian, as to my precise obligations." "You know damn well." He was pacing now, agitated. "Mother and father assured me you'd understand. They said you'd do the honorable thing when the situation demanded it." Victoria's face went stark white. "Sebastian, cease this instant. They said you'd never permit the family to falter. That's why they utilized your accounts. Because they knew, ultimately, you'd cover any shortfall." Charlotte was taking copious notes. Victoria lunged for my phone, but I moved it out of her reach. "So they premeditated this?" I pressed. "They knew, from the outset, they were going to misappropriate my funds without my explicit consent?" "Of course they did," Sebastian shouted, his composure shattering. "They've been doing it for years. Ever since my first tech venture required an infusion of capital." "Sebastian, be silent." Alistair stood abruptly. "No, let him continue," Diana said, her own phone now conspicuously recording. "Let's hear all about the family's innovative financial strategies." Ethan, who'd been observing the unfolding drama with a detached air, suddenly spoke. Is this entire exchange being recorded on multiple devices? Because I believe I may have inadvertently live-streamed a portion of it to the Friends of the Philharmonic WhatsApp group." The room fell into a stunned silence. "The what?" Victoria whispered. Ethan consulted his phone. "Oh yes, definitely shared with." "Wow, it appears several journalists from the major financial papers are also members of that chat." He looked up, feigning contrition. "My apologies. Shall I attempt to delete it?" Sebastian lunged for Ethan's phone. "Too late, I'm afraid," Ethan said, looking not at all apologetic. "It's already been downloaded and reshared multiple times." Victoria sank into her chair, a low moan escaping her lips. "Do you have any comprehension of what you've done?" "Yes," Ethan replied calmly. I've merely ensured the truth was disseminated. It seems that's been long overdue in this family. My phone began to vibrate incessantly with notifications, news alerts from Bloomberg and the Wall Street Journal, messages from astonished acquaintances, rapidly proliferating social media tags. It's trending, Charlotte observed, checking her own device. Hashtag Ashworth implosion. Prominent financial news outlets are already running with it. Manhattan dynasty mired in fraud allegations. Alexandra. Alastair's voice was desperate. You must issue a statement immediately. Tell them it's a gross misrepresentation. I stood up. You're quite right. I should make a statement. Thank God, Victoria breathed. I believe I'll begin with the misappropriation of my university trust fund, then progress chronologically to the multiple instances of forged financial instruments. Would you care to fact-check the details for me beforehand? The color drained from Alastair's face. You wouldn't dare. As if on cue, my phone rang. A reporter from the New York Times. Actually, I said, I believe I'll take this call right now. Would anyone care to remain and listen to my on-the-record comments? They scattered. Victoria towards the kitchen, Alastair to his study, Sebastian bolting out the front door. Only Diana, Ethan, and Charlotte remained. You know what the most effective form of retribution is? Ethan asked, a wide grin spreading across his face. The unvarnished truth. Articulated loudly and publicly, I answered the phone. Yes, this is Alexandra Sterling Ashworth. I would be pleased to comment on the current situation. In fact, I have a rather comprehensive story to share. Behind me, I heard Victoria begin to sob, a raw, keening sound. But for the first time in my life, her tears failed to elicit even a flicker of response. The exposé, titled The True Price of Privilege, How My Family Weaponized My Financial Identity for Decades, went viral within hours. It spread across global financial networks and social media platforms like a digital wildfire. My phone became a relentless source of notifications. You've struck a profound chord, Charlotte said, scrolling through an avalanche of comments and shares. Thousands had reposted, hundreds were sharing analogous experiences of familial financial exploitation. I had laid bare everything, the purloined education fund, the forged documents, the decades of systemic financial abuse masquerading as familial obligation. Every assertion was meticulously corroborated with scanned documents, annotated timelines, and audio excerpts. Have you seen the Financial Times? Diana called. Alastair's firm just issued a statement announcing his immediate and permanent retirement. Corporate euphemism for terminated with extreme prejudice. Victoria had already been unceremoniously asked to resign from the boards of 3 prominent cultural institutions. The admissions committee of their exclusive country club was reportedly convening an emergency review of their membership. Their painstakingly curated social edifice was crumbling, stone by stone. Sebastian has vanished, Ethan reported later that day. Packed a valise and departed the city. A source mentioned seeing him at a private airfield, boarding a flight to an undisclosed Caribbean destination. I was observing the receivers appointed by the court methodically inventorying the contents of my childhood townhouse when Charlotte arrived with coffee. You don't have to witness this, she said gently. Yes, I do. I took a sip. I need to see this chapter definitively closed. The receivers were efficient, tagging valuable antiques and artwork for auction. Through the tall drawing room window, I could see Victoria seated in her chauffeured Bentley across the street, a solitary, watching figure. She hadn't attempted to contact me since the story broke. My phone rang, an unknown international number. Is this Ms. Alexandra Sterling Ashworth? A woman's voice, accented, inquired. I'm with the Victim Support Unit in Antigua. We're attempting to locate Mr. Sebastian Ashworth's next of kin. You are listed as his primary emergency contact. Of course I am, I muttered. What has transpired? He has been detained at a local correctional facility. He is urgently requesting assistance with certain outstanding financial liabilities and legal representation. I ended the call and deleted the subsequent voicemail without listening. More liabilities? Charlotte asked, an eyebrow raised. Perpetually. A dark sedan with diplomatic plates pulled up to the townhouse. Two impeccably dressed individuals, a man and a woman, emerged, exuding an air of quiet authority. Federal Bureau of Investigation, the man announced, displaying his credentials. We're here regarding the allegations of wire fraud and securities violations. I nodded towards the house. They are within. Follow the sound of despair. As the agents walked past, Victoria finally exited her car and approached me, her face a mask of haggard fury. Are you satisfied now? She demanded, her voice raw with unshed tears. You've obliterated everything we meticulously constructed. No, I corrected her calmly. I merely exposed what you systematically destroyed. There is a significant distinction. We are your parents. You are individuals who committed multiple felonies and, incidentally, raised me. She flinched as if struck. We gave you every conceivable advantage. You took every conceivable asset. And now, you are losing everything. That is not vengeance. That is simple, immutable cause and effect. Alistair emerged from the townhouse, flanked by the FBI agents. He looked frail, defeated, a pale imitation of his former imposing self. Alexandra, he called out, his voice thin, please, one final time, help us navigate this. I walked over to him, close enough to see the stark terror in his eyes. No, I said softly, but firmly. I am not navigating, rectifying, or mitigating anything further. You orchestrated this. All of it. Now you and Victoria will experience what Sebastian was never permitted to learn, the full weight of unmitigated consequences. But where will we reside? Victoria was openly weeping now. That, I replied, echoing a phrase she had so often deployed when I'd questioned her profligate spending. Sounds like a you problem. My phone buzzed again. Another journalist requesting an official comment. I answered on speaker. Yes, I am currently observing the initial stages of the asset seizure. No, I will not be assisting my parents with alternative accommodations. Yes, I possess comprehensive documentation of every fraudulent transaction perpetrated in my name. Would you care for digital copies for your investigative team? Victoria lunged for the phone. I stepped back. Stop, I said, my voice imbued with an authority even she could not contest. You no longer control this narrative. The receivers were beginning to remove smaller, crated items of furniture. 34 years of accumulated memories of a life built on a foundation of lies, being itemized and prepared for dispersal. What about familial loyalty? Alistair asked weakly, a last, desperate plea. Loyalty? I laughed, a short, sharp sound devoid of humor. Let us discuss loyalty. Let us discuss the systematic plundering of your daughter's future to finance your son's perpetual failures. Let us discuss forgery, fraud, and decades of calculated deceit. Is that the brand of loyalty you champion? Charlotte touched my arm gently. The FBI agents would like to take your formal deposition now at their field office. I nodded, then turned back to my parents one last time. Do you know what's truly remarkable? I'm not even angry anymore. I'm simply finished. Finished rectifying. Finished enabling. Finished pretending this was ever a semblance of a functional, ethical family. Alexandra, please. Victoria tried one last, desperate appeal. Goodbye, mother. Father. I wish you fortitude in your dealings with the Bureau. And if Sebastian contacts you from Antigua, inform him his designated emergency contact is no longer in service. I walked away as their voices, calling my name, faded behind me like echoes from a distant, unpleasant dream. In my pocket, my phone buzzed with another voicemail, presumably from Sebastian. I deleted it without listening. Some claim revenge is a dish best served cold. But this wasn't revenge. It was emancipation. And it felt unexpectedly warm, like the first rays of dawn after an interminable, frigid night. Behind me, I heard the distinct sound of the official seizure notice being affixed to the grand oak door. The sharp crack of adhesive tape against wood was like a period, emphatically struck at the end of a very long, very painful sentence. Finally, gloriously, the end. You're genuinely proceeding with this? Charlotte asked, watching me pack my Rimowa carry-on for an extended sojourn in Italy. 3 months of Renaissance art, Tuscan wine, and an utter absence of familial obligations. I carefully folded another silk blouse. Care to join me for the Amalfi Coast segment? Already have my ticket confirmed. She held up her phone, displaying a flight confirmation. Someone needs to assist you in responsibly deploying all that meticulously shielded capital. My viral exposé had, unexpectedly, ignited a movement. Survivors of familial financial abuse were sharing their narratives, forming support networks, and advocating for legislative reforms. I had been invited to provide expert testimony before a Senate subcommittee on strengthening laws against identity theft and financial fraud within family structures. My phone buzzed. A secure message from Diana. Your mother has been frantically contacting everyone in her address book. She claims she and your father are residing in some ghastly extended stay hotel in New Jersey while the federal investigation proceeds. She continues to insist that if you would only speak with them. No longer my concern. I concur. Just thought you should be apprised. Sebastian has reportedly surfaced in Monaco. He's regaling casino patrons with tales of his imminent new cryptocurrency venture. I laughed. Good luck securing investors with his name now irrevocably linked to international fraud headlines. Ah, but that's the clever bit, Diana replied. He's operating under an entirely new alias. Not to worry, however. I've already discreetly alerted the relevant Monegasque financial authorities. The doorbell chimed. Ethan stood there with artisanal coffee and pastries from Balthazar. Brought your farewell breakfast, he said, setting everything on my marble console. Also thought you might find this illuminating. He pulled up a Wall Street Journal article on his tablet. Manhattan wealth management firm faces class action lawsuit amidst widening fraud scandal. Alistair's former company. Turns out your situation wasn't an isolated incident. The FBI's investigation has unearthed a veritable Pandora's box of creative accounting for favored clients. My phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. It's Sebastian. Acquired a new SIM. Please, Alex, I desperately need your assistance. One final time. I blocked the number without a flicker of hesitation. Do you know what I've come to realize? I remarked to Ethan and Charlotte. True justice isn't about inflicting pain. It's about disengaging and allowing the natural, inexorable consequences of one's actions to take their course. Speaking of consequences, Charlotte said, glancing at an email on her phone. Rothschild & Company's internal review has concluded. They've approved your full restitution claim for the initial unauthorized collateralization, plus punitive damages. They're transferring every traceable dollar from the fraudulent loan proceeds. I don't even desire it, I said. Donate it. To programs promoting financial literacy for vulnerable young adults. Already drafted the necessary charitable trust documents. Another text arrived, a photograph forwarded by Diana. My parents, standing forlornly outside a drab motel, looking diminished and lost. Victoria had appended a caption, "Behold what your actions have wrought." I typed back a single sentence. No. Behold what your actions have wrought. Ethan peered over my shoulder. They still fundamentally fail to grasp it, do they? They never will. And that, finally, is no longer my burden to bear. I finished packing, placing my passport into my Hermes travel wallet. First class to Rome, then Florence, then onwards, wherever my whims might lead. No one to answer to, no impending crisis to avert, no residual guilt to carry. Your car service is downstairs, Charlotte announced. Ready? I took one final glance around my serene apartment. On my minimalist coffee table sat the only family photograph I had retained. Myself, at my Columbia MBA graduation, radiant and oblivious, before I knew about the plundered education fund, before I truly comprehended the devastating potential of family to inflict harm upon its own. "You're not taking it?" Ethan asked, gesturing to the photo. "No." I picked up my carry-on. "I'm traveling light." At the door, I received one final text from Victoria. "You cannot simply abandon your family, indefinitely." I showed it to Charlotte and Ethan. "Observe me," I said, and all three of us shared a genuine, liberating laugh. The morning was luminous and clear as we headed to JFK. No ominous storm clouds, no dramatic meteorological phenomena to underscore the moment, just crystalline sunshine and boundless possibility. "You know what's truly ironic?" I said as we pulled up to the private terminal. "They always pontificated that family was about sacrifice, about relinquishing one's own desires for the perceived needs of the collective. And now?" Charlotte prompted. "Now I understand that real family, the kind one consciously chooses and cultivates, is about mutual growth and support, not a parasitic draining of one another's resources and spirit." Ethan embraced me warmly. "Bring me back something outrageously extravagant from Via Condotti." "With my legally protected and ethically managed funds?" "Indubitably." Charlotte checked her own boarding pass. "See you in Florence next week. Try not to acquire all the Botticellis before my arrival." As I walked through the streamlined security process, my phone buzzed one last time. A voicemail from Alistair. "Alexandra, please. We remain your parents. You cannot simply walk away from your heritage, your blood." I deleted it without listening to the conclusion. They were correct about one salient point. I was indeed walking away. But they were profoundly mistaken about the motivation. This wasn't about retribution. It wasn't even, ultimately, about them anymore. It was about finally, irrevocably understanding that sometimes the most compassionate act one can perform for a perpetually drowning family is to release the lifeline. I boarded the aircraft, accepted a glass of Krug, and watched the coastline of America recede beneath the clouds. Somewhere down there, my biological family was confronting the unvarnished reality of their choices without me, without my capital, without their accustomed safety net. And I was soaring free, light as air, into a future that was, at long last, entirely and unequivocally my own.